Hi, my name is Misha Stone, she, her, and I'm a Reader Services Librarian at the Seattle Public Library. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the Seattle Public Library is on Indigenous land. These are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. Thank you so much for joining us today for Conversation Hearts, Bisexual Romance, a panel discussion moderated by New York Times columnist and Washington State Book Award finalist, Olivia Waite, along with amazing panelists, Alexandria Bellefleur, Alyssa Cole, Katrina Jackson, Casey McQuiston, and Rebekah Weatherspoon. I couldn't be more excited to hear this conversation, and I was bowled over when all of these authors said yes. I know Olivia had something to do with it. Thank you, Olivia. I also want to mention that we ended up planning this without realizing that this is Bisexual Awareness Week, and I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate. This event is sponsored by the Seattle Public Library Foundation, author series sponsor Gary Kunis, and media sponsor, the Seattle Times, and presented in partnership. Thank you ever so much to our partners, Third Place Books and Greater Seattle Romance Writers of America. You'll hear a bit from both of our amazing partners in a moment before the panel discussion gets started. But I also wanted to mention that the library will be sharing a survey throughout this event. We'd love to hear your feedback, share your thoughts, let us know what kind of programming you want to see. And now I'm going to hand it over to Ali Pontrello from Third Place Books. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Misha, and thank you to the Seattle Public Library and the Greater Seattle Romance Writers of America for letting us join in on this wonderful event. My name is Ali, and I'm a bookseller at Third Place Books. So through virtual events like tonight's, Third Place Books is fortunate to continue connecting readers with authors in an intimate setting. As much as we miss having authors in our stores, we're so grateful to have this new platform that brings our growing event series right into your homes all across the world. So if you're not familiar with our store, or you're one of our viewers watching from across the world today, Third Place Books was founded in 1998 in Lake Forest Park, Washington, just a bit north of Seattle. Today we have 3 stores across the greater Seattle area, and we love our romance readers and writers. So after tonight's event, we hope you'll stop by and visit us in person to see our robust romance section, carefully curated by our staff. We'll gladly recommend you a book by any and all of the authors you'll be meeting this afternoon. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok, please do, and definitely sign up for our email newsletter where you can be the first to know about our future event lineup. Go to thirdplacebooks.com to sign up for that newsletter and use our website search function to check out the latest from our authors today. Your purchases truly sustain this author series, and we're so happy to have you here. And now Nicole Knightley from the Greater Seattle Romance Writers of America will take it from here.
Thank you so much, Ali. I'm so excited to be here representing the Greater Seattle Romance Writers group. I'm the VP of programs there. So if you love romance novels like the ones we're going to be discussing today, and you're interested in writing your own, we have a strong community of writers at all levels in GSRWA. From those just starting out with their first draft to New York Times bestselling authors, we've created a welcoming community of romance writers with monthly meetings where we bring in published authors and industry experts to help us grow in our craft. Check out gsrwa.org for more information and instructions on how to join our chapter. We're also really excited to be hosting Emerald City Writers Conference next month. So if you're looking for a deep dive into writing romance, we'd love to see you there. The conference takes place October 15th to 17th. It's online with in-depth 3-hour masterclasses from Adriana Herrera, Alexa Martin, and Angela James. We also have 23 pre-recorded workshops followed by live Q&As to help you level up in your craft of writing, business, and publishing. Now let's get to the good stuff. Today's panel. It's my honor to introduce our moderator, Olivia Waite, who writes queer historical romance, fantasy, science fiction, and essays. She is the romantic fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review.
Hi, everybody. I am absolutely delighted to be moderating this panel today. It is a dream team with some of my favorite local organizations as well. I'm a former third place bookseller, former GSRWA member, and I've been going to the SBL since I was tiny, too tiny to even get my own library card. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to your panelists. First, Alyssa Cole is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of romance, thrillers, and graphic novels. Her contemporary royal rom-com, A Princess in Theory, was one of the New York Times 100 Notable Books of 2018, and her debut thriller, When No One Is Watching, won the 2021 Edgar Award for Best Paperback Original. When she's not working, she can usually be found watching anime, having an existential crisis, or wrangling her pets. Alexandria Bellefleur is a best-selling and award-winning author of swoony contemporary romance, often featuring lovable grumps and the sunshine characters who bring them to their knees. A Pacific Northwesterner at heart, Alexandria has a weakness for good coffee, Pike IPA, and voodoo donuts. Her special skills include finding the best pad thai in every city she visits, remembering faces but not names, falling asleep in movie theaters, and keeping cool while reading smutty books in public. Her debut novel, Written in the Stars, was a 2021 Lambda Literary Award winner and a 2020 winner of the Ripped Bodice Awards for Excellence in Romantic Fiction. Katrina Jackson is an historian by day and a writer by weekend. She writes racially diverse and queer erotica, erotic romance, and historical fiction. She enjoys 70s disco and good wine. Casey McQuiston is a writer, books, essays, books, articles, books. She lives at the intersection of fun, escapist romantic adventure and smart-mouthed characters with bad manners and big hearts. Born and raised in the Deep South, McQuiston was taught how to love a good story and a great biscuit, and now lives and works in New York City with her Weatherspoon turned to writing romance to get her fix. Raised in southern New Hampshire, Rebekah Weatherspoon now lives in Southern California, where she will remain forever because she hates moving. With over 20 titles under her belt, Rebekah has covered subgenres from suspenseful paranormal romance to steamy BDSM romantic comedies, and now young adult romance. Look for If the Boot Fits, the second book in her Cowboys of California trilogy, out now from Kensington Books. You can find Rebekah and her books on Twitter at r.spoon and her website. Well, all right, everybody. So as the subject says, we're here today to talk about bisexual and pansexual characters in romance and queer romance more broadly, something a little more broad spectrum than the usual MM and FF divisions that we get like so many other places. And so I think the first thing, I'm just going to ask questions and then we're going to just run with it, and I'm going to sit back and listen. I'm so excited. When we talk about bisexual romance, does it feel like a genre? We have gay romance and MM romance, and we have lesbian romance. Is there a genre of bisexual romance?
We have to call on people.
Yeah. We're writers. We get, we're not speakers. I mean, I think that it's really a hard question to answer because, like, I don't really know what we were saying before we started. I don't really know what you have to do to write a book that like is described by other people as bisexual, because unless you have like a love triangle of different genders, or it's polyamorous or something, I feel like most people tend to categorize it based on the end game ship or pairing, or whatever you want to call it. And so, like, to me, like, when I read a book that's like got a bisexual protagonist and it's from like a bisexual point of view, I can see, like, you know, when every single character in the book is like described as hot, I'm like, this is bisexual to me, you know? And so to me, it feels like a very distinctive flavor of romance, but I think it's really hard to get that across in like marketing copy or just to like get people to like kind of understand what you're doing there.
Have people referred to One Last Stop as lesbian romance that you've seen?
Oh yeah. Yeah, everybody does. Yeah, I'm sure you know how that feels. I'm sure everybody on this panel knows how that feels.
Yeah, I think it's, basically what Casey said. It can be difficult unless it's clear that, unless there is, and this is partially the thing that sucks, unless there is sexual interaction between the character, like for a bisexual romance, it would be like, okay, have they slept with people of, whatever, any gender, on page. And like, this is something that I actually wasn't really thinking about as I was writing. And then when, what is that book called? The last book in The Reluctant Royals with Johan. I am totally, I'm totally blanking.
It's a Prince on Paper.
A Prince on Paper, thank you. When A Prince on Paper came out, someone, and like this didn't happen a lot, it's not like a widespread thing, but someone sent me a message, like a DM, and was like, did I miss like the sweaty sex scene between Johan and another man, or was that? And I was like, what are you talking about? And it was like, oh, because it says he's queer. But, and I was like, and like, I don't even think they realized that they were being insulting. I was like, what? I mean, I responded as nicely as I could, but I was like, first of all, what would get into your head to like make you search my name and then open the DMs and then send that to me? But also, like, do you not understand how problematic that is? So I do think that there is this kind of, you know, it's somewhat related to the sexualization of bisexuality. Like, it's only if you see the person sleeping with people of all sexes, then they're bisexual or pansexual. But if they say it but end up with someone of the opposite sex, then they are, you know, heterosexual basically. And if they end up with someone of the same sex, then they are gay or lesbian. And so it's like this weird thing that it's not taking the character's point of view. It's kind of like, okay, well, I don't see them having sex with someone else on page, so I'm just going to, I don't know, it's like a kind of weird thing.
Yeah, I feel like there's a desire to attribute an orientation to relationships versus individuals when, you know, in a romance, you know, there are going to be potentially multiple orientations within a relationship. So I try to stick to, like, in my FFs, defining it as a sapphic romance, or in my, you know, MF romances, defining it as just a queer romance, as like an umbrella catch-all term. And then I also think there's kind of a mix-up between action and attraction, like you were mentioning, Alyssa, about what's on page, if the characters have, you know, have or haven't, you know, had an intimate or romantic relationship mentioned or actually seen on page between, you know, if the hero or heroine or character has, you know, relationships with multiple genders. So that can kind of get mixed up, I feel like, action and attraction, and that it's hard to define and it's tricky, but I try to stick to like umbrella terms personally.
For me, I think I'm going to give my really blunt, honest answer with this. I feel like when I'm writing a book, and then when social media has changed everything. I'm just going to say that. Social media has changed a lot of things from when I first started writing. And when I first started writing, I was writing FF romance that was always categorized as lesbian romance, even though one of the heroines was always bisexual or pansexual or fluid. They were always categorized as lesbian romance because I was being published with a publisher who was promoting themselves as a lesbian publisher. So it's interesting when you write a story and then how it's packaged, and then it's how it's received by readers. And then social media has like changed that, like Bookstagram and Book Talk and like Facebook and everything. The way people talk about books has changed, and the way people even want to visualize the way they talk about books through social media has changed things. So when I'm writing, I think to myself, like, who is this person on a whole, right? Like Alexandra said, who is this person on a whole? Are they someone who has had, what kind of past relationships have they had? What is their attraction like in general outside of this relationship that I'm building for them? And then how do I build that into their present relationship? Are they going to disclose this information to each other? Is it just implied? Are they going to talk about it? Are they going to talk about past relationships? Are they going to talk about how their families responded to their sexuality? All that kind of stuff. And so that's how I approach it as an author. By the time it gets to a list, or by the time it gets to a panel, it's like, I finished that book 5 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting to see what I crafted and then how it's categorized. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I just learned this week that bisexual romance is actually a category on Amazon. And I did not know this. All of my books are categorized as lesbian romance on Amazon. Well, not all of my books, but the Feminine Pursuits series. Do you find you get, do any of you find you get resistance? Like, Alyssa, you mentioned somebody writing to you horribly in the DMs about like asking where the other sex, where the missing sex scene was. And do you find like, I mean, we know that there's a truism that MM readers don't want any MF sex in their books. We hear that a lot. We hear a lot of resistance to kind of that multi-pairing style of romance that I think a lot of like what I would consider bisexual romance ends up. Like, is it an obstacle with readers if you're trying to do something they may not expect?
For me, I would say no. So from the beginning, from my first book, I started after Rebekah. My first book was published after Rebekah, and it was a MF book with 2 straight characters. Her best friend was bisexual, a bisexual woman. His partner was a lesbian, and I was going to give both of them books, and they were not even going to date each other. And I thought I was straight at this time. Okay, anyway, but I was like, I'm just really interested in developing books for both of these 2 characters. Like, I'm such a great ally. But the publisher at the time was supportive, but they were also like, people don't read those books. People don't want books with 2 women. And this was back in 2013. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're like, you can do it, but no one's going to buy it. And then I was like, okay, but then I started working on something else. And it was the series where the first couple was MF, and then the second couple was 2 gay men. And it was so mixed relationship series. And even that, people were like, oh, well, you know, it's kind of weird because people want all of one thing or another. And I feel like the books did find their readers. I wouldn't say there was resistance, but, you know, on the one hand, a lot of people who were like, I don't think I would have read this book if it was like a standalone, but it was part of this series, so I wanted to read it, and it was the first MM book that I ever read. So I think for me, I've actually seen the opposite. Even, and like that case that I mentioned, most people are cool. 99.9% of people are cool, but that one person did show me the seamy underbelly of what people are thinking about bisexual romance. But so in a way, like writing all different kinds of couples and writing bisexual romances kind of did have people who said, oh, I think I would only read romances with straight couples, saying, okay, well, I'm reading this series. Actually, I'm going to read this book with this other couple. And hey, I ended up liking it. It was the same thing as reading a book. You know, there were people who it was representation for them and they were happy. And there were other people who were like, oh, it's a romance. Cool. All right. That's not a big deal. And I think I saw Katrina seeming like she had something to say. I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't, but I saw you.
I was just going to say, as someone who does write polyamorous romance, I don't think that anyone cares for me. But it's the expectation, right? Like Alyssa said, so I write a lot of mixed series where there are a lot of polyamorous triads and queer couples of various orientations. But I think it helps if they're queer, their friend group or families are also queer, right? So I think the problem becomes when you isolate them, and then that feels scary to some readers, or that feels unsure. But I think, at least for me, if you start a series with a FFM triad and every friend they have is like explicitly queer and flirting with each other, I think it's hard to sort of say, oh, I had no idea this would happen later. So I just sort of set expectations so I can do what I want later.
Do you find you have like more leeway to experiment in the indie space than you would in, say, something like TradPub?
Yeah, because again, I get to do what I want, but also I get to set my Amazon categories. So I, of course, know there's a bisexual romance category because I can choose that.
Do you think that the relationship between indie and trad pub has changed with regard to bisexual characters in the past few years?
I don't know.
I would say so. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I came out the gate again. Like my first book I set out was, you know, FF vampires, and the responses I got to that were ranged from like disappointing to hilarious. But those early contracts that I signed, like I couldn't even imagine Casey and Alexandra's books being out there, because so many people were like, nah, this is never going to happen. Like, good luck. You have to self-publish this or just do small press forever. Like, no one's going to want to buy this from you. And also just, there was a lot of interesting pushback from readers too. And, you know, some of it was, you could see it was just a preference of reading, and some of it was also weirdly hurtful. So it was interesting to just see where queer romances featuring women were falling kind of in the sphere of things. And I feel like things have changed a lot. I mean, I have a FFYA coming out in 2023, and I never, with a traditional publisher, I never thought that would happen ever. So yeah, things have definitely changed a lot.
I would say, yeah, like I said, when I was with that publisher, which was it was a digital publisher, which, you know, they were publishing all kinds of different things at that time point. And they were still like, okay, if you want to do FF, then you can. No one's going to stop you, but no one's going to buy it, was the basic gist of what was going on. So these last few years have been really cool. And I will say that I can only speak for myself, but working with traditional publishers, I literally just am like, I'm going to write this. And then they say, okay. Or, you know, sometimes you got to do a little Trojan horse, like, oh, this is like an MF couple, but you know what? Actually, I think it works better as an FF. And then that's the only thing I can write at this point. And that's how it goes. So but no one was ever like, no, you cannot do this. It was usually just like, well, okay, that's not what you say we're gonna write, but we're gonna go with it. It's cool. So I think it depends on the publisher and what they are trying to do, and it depends on the publisher, your editor, and you know, whether, I don't know, what you're writing, and whether you think you're like, I don't know, it's at a certain point, you know, because you're writing FF, you're writing sapphic romance, you're like, this is what I can write. Like, either you're going to take it or you're not going to take it. So I think that's one of the things that's changed in traditional publishing as well. And also the understanding, to be, you know, honest, that people will buy it, that it will make them money, that people want to read it, and that they were wrong about the fact that people didn't want to read it.
Yeah, all the way up until 2018, I was hearing FF just doesn't sell as well. And then for some reason, I sold a 3-book FF series to Avon. And I was like, okay, this is great. I'm excited, but I still kind of don't know how we got there. And suddenly FF is like feasible. Like Erica Ridley's got one coming out in a historical series, and we've got a lot of queer MF and FF coming out. And Alyssa Cole's, yours was the first modern Avon romance with 2 women, I believe. Like, I know there's been research out there about Avon pulps from the 70s that are very queer, that looks super interesting. But speaking of all that, I was also wondering, just for the whole panel, do you approach writing bisexual characters differently based on gender? Like, is writing a bisexual man different than writing a bisexual woman? Writing somebody who's trans and bi, or maybe like pan and trans or non-binary? Like, how does gender play into like how you approach this kind of character?
I mean, for me, I feel like it's more that I think every character is different. I think that like every bisexual person has like a slightly different relationship with their gender, with their sexuality, and with like where those things overlap. You know, and so for me, I feel like it's more about like, okay, for example, like my first book, like the main character is a lot more like experience. Like my second book, like the main character is virgin, and so like they both like have different expressions of their sexuality and different ways of like what they want to get out of a sexual interaction, you know, and that kind of informs what bisexuality looks like to them. And so I feel like there are certain things that, you know, are really more informed by like a character's own like background and what they're bringing into a sexual situation than even more than their gender. But there are, I mean, I feel like more than anything, I'm just like trying to be aware of like what like the stereotypes are about like, you know, bisexual men, bisexual women, bisexual non-binary people, and how to avoid those or explore them in a way that is like fun or funny. And so like it's very much like different from case to case. But I feel like gender is like one of many, many factors that goes into like, how does this person like experience and engage with their sexuality?
Alexandria, we haven't heard too much from you. How you have a series that has both 2 FF novels and a queer MF in the middle. So do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, in my FFs and in my MFs, the heroine has been bisexual in all 3 of those. So I can't really speak to writing a bisexual hero, but I agree. I would approach it as being one facet of a character, not, you know, gender being the entire character. I think for me, between my 3 books, it's been interesting kind of drawing in readers of, you know, traditionally, you know, MF straight romance and readers of sapphic romance. I've kind of noticed there are some readers of straight romance who are a little leery of reading an MF queer romance, and readers of like sapphic lesbian romance. It's kind of hard to pull them into a queer MF romance. That's been an interesting kind of like gap to kind of bridge, explaining that it's just one facet of a character. Yeah, I can't really speak to writing, you know, bisexual heroes.
Well, I know Casey and Rebekah have bisexual heroes. I believe Katrina as well, and I know Alyssa does.
I don't think that I write them differently, although I do think a lesson I learned when I published Pink Slip, where everyone in the relationship is bisexual, is that because there's a sapphic, 2 sapphic characters and then a male character, everyone assumed he was straight. And then in another book, I have a straight woman in a relationship with 2 bisexual, well, a bisexual and a pansexual man. And everyone assumed the woman was bi, even though I had been actually pretty explicit. So I think the lesson I learned was that I needed to be really explicit when men are queer, even if they're in obviously queer relationships.
For me, like Casey had said, like it depends on the character on a whole. But for a lot of my characters, and I know, you know, Alyssa and Katrina have to deal with this as well, like my characters being people of color, and especially them being Black, is important to me. Whenever I write, my books always have like large friend groups and large family groups, and there's always a lot of people around my characters. They're not like the lone isolated queer in the corner with no one. So their family, their friends, their coworkers, all that stuff matters, you know? So when I was writing Harbor, and I created Vaughn, who is, you know, he's in my mind like a 6'5" Black man who is a lawyer in Boston. And like, what does that mean for him? What does it mean for him to be a Black man to begin with, living in Boston, right? And then what does it mean if he is a sensitive Black man living in Boston and he's in relationship with another man who he loves dearly, whose family doesn't accept him? Like, what does that look like when you're trying to build a relationship within your community? Where are you drawing your support from? Where are you drawing the strength within your relationship from? So for me, I thought a lot about the queer Black men I know, and tried to be sensitive to like who they are as people and not what society like views them as, and how society tries to limit them as human beings. And I wanted to make them as full and lovely as the queer men I know in real life. So that was, to me, that was really important, just to make sure that it was clear that these were like complete human beings who were in a polyamorous relationship and had gone through a lot. And on the page, I learned very early that not only do you have to say that people are specifically a sexuality or gender or whatever, you have to say that people are Black. I learned that very early on. And if anyone remembers the Hunger Games kerfuffle of 2000 whatever, where everyone decided that Rue wasn't Black, even though it's very explicit on the page. Sometimes you do very much. I in my books will say when people are white. People like to default characters to however they feel like defaulting them to. So I think it's really important to say this person is, you know, like in Sated, I specifically have like Daniel, who is a bisexual Korean man. He's not a white guy. He's not something else. He's a bisexual Korean man. You can't, it's on the page. It's there. So I think that's really important to put that kind of thing in your manuscripts.
So there's a sense of like a bisexual character has to come out like kind of over and over, would you say? Or sorry, I mean,
I think like it's hard. Like, so people can either pick up on it, overlook it, or be looking for something else. Like, you know, Mikhail and John were both, they were not bisexual, so I wouldn't go with them. But like with Johan, for example, I tried to make it clear that he was, you know, checking everyone out. He's checking literally everyone out. And I tried to make it just how I would have anyone else who was the type of character who was checking anyone out, to make it clear that, like, you know, when he is admiring Sanyu's thighs, it's not just because he is like trying to get his gym coach. But yeah, so basically I think like you can put hints, but also a bit at a certain point it's out of your hands. You can just make it clear in a way that is, you know, you're not trying to, it's not I don't think it's like a purposeful trying to reiterate it, but it's just integrating aspects of the character that make it clear. And if a reader wants to pick up on it, they're going to pick up on it. If they want to overlook it, even if you have literally have the character like standing and screaming, "I am bisexual," then they're going to. So just kind of, you just do what you can, and it depends at the end of the day on how it's received by the person who is reading it.
I also think, Olivia, what you were saying about coming out over and over again, I feel like in real life, people have to come out over and over again. I mean, in the last few years, I've had to like explain my sexuality to like 8 people who like know me. And I'm like, why are we having this conversation again? And they're like, but I have questions. And you're just like, oh, okay. So I feel like in real life, people make assumptions based on what you look like, how you dress, whatever. And you end up having to come out over and over again for the rest of your life. And I also think there's a safety element too. I think sometimes when you meet new people or you're around new people, you have to gauge if they're cool with you as a human being, and if they're safe to be around, or if they're safe to bring your other queer friends around too. You know, you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a relationship with a cishet guy and they're cool with you being bisexual, but then you find out they've got some other bigotry going on. It's important to find out those sort of things. So I think, again, on page, I like to have the characters kind of present themselves. I did that for Mason and Zenny because I was thinking about his safety. He had been in a situation where his sexuality made him unsafe. And I wanted him to be able to say, like, am I safe with you? And for her to say, am I safe with you? Mm-hmm. And that's really important. And then that translates to readers. If they pick up the book and they're like, oh, this is disgusting. Well, I guess I saved myself from a reader who's like not okay with this happening on the page, but also isn't okay with me in real life. And that's a legitimate thing. You know, it's a legitimate thing to think about, and I don't think it's something to be looked at lightly. And I think, especially for younger people too, just to model that, like, as you are navigating this, like, just things to think about. You know, surround yourself with safe people, surround your friends with safe people. It's really important.
And Mason and Zenny are such a great example of that, because like the way that they bonded over that shared identity and that shared kind of experience was something that really grounded them in a plot that was otherwise really high concept, like the whole marriage of convenience because of your aunt's will thing, like was so like, it was so rom-com and it was so high drama that they had something really real and really vulnerable to connect over. And I think it really kind of grounded that relationship, which also leads me to ask about tropes. Do you have a favorite trope to play with where bisexual characters are concerned, or do you think all tropes are pretty equal opportunity? Are there tropes that work less well or tropes that work even better when you like start making characters bi or pan?
The thing I'm working on right now that is like the only thing I've run up against is I'm trying to figure out how to do secret baby with two women. So I'm going to try, that's the one, everything else I'm like, I got this. I'm currently trying to figure out how to do a secret baby with two women. So
you were like, I need a challenge.
I was like, I mean, it's like, obviously not impossible. It's very easy, but I'm trying, not very easy, but I'm trying to figure out like, marriage of convenience was tricky in a contemporary setting. So I'm thinking of like, how do we have a secret baby or oopsie baby? Like, how does a child materialize? And then how do you bring people together with like, where did this baby come from? So like, I'm interested to see how I pull that off. I'll report back.
I am looking forward to that. Go ahead, Alyssa.
No, I was just going to say, I can't really think of any particular trope or something that I think of as specifically. I think all tropes need to have bisexual romances need to take over all tropes to proliferate in all tropes. Just like any other marginalized group, there is no trope that is played out. Like we can write anything. I'm having trouble. I couldn't think of anything that would be difficult. Rebekah brought up the secret baby, but which is a good one. But yeah, I can't think of anything in particular.
Yeah, I've been struggling with marriage of convenience in like historical settings for two women, which it's an interesting thing because you get, you don't have the automatic social pressure to marry that you can kind of leverage in an MF historical. But on the other hand, your characters also don't have to worry about chaperones ever, so they can like make out whenever they pretty much want. So there's these different obstacles and opportunities that I've had a lot of fun exploring. Like nobody minds if two women go and hang out in a parlor and close the door, right? And I'm like, oh, this makes a lot of scenes much easier. Like you don't have to engineer some sort of like isolation.
There is an interesting, I wouldn't say challenge necessarily, but I know in my sophomore novel, Hang the Moon, Annie and Brendan they're not quite like childhood best friends, but they've known each other for a long time. So it is kind of understood off the page that Brendan would know that Annie is bisexual, but they don't have an explicit conversation on the page about her attraction to women as well. But it's stated in other instances with new friends of Annie's and flirtatious interaction with a barista in the first chapter. So I felt like it was pretty explicit, but I feel like because it wasn't discussed between the two characters and the relationship on page, hey, by the way, I'm bi, some readers maybe missed it. So that is an interesting, I don't know, kind of concept for me going forward, kind of thinking about how explicit to be, but not wanting to be like having a very telling moment of, oh, by the way, because that doesn't feel genuine to me in all relationships. So I do think that it's something that I consider in every relationship I write, a genuine moment of when that would be discussed, if it's discussed off page or on page, and when it's relevant, if it's relevant, because I don't think it's always relevant for every story, especially a lot of the stories I write, my characters' orientations aren't a big part of the plot. I don't have coming out plots. I don't have plots where someone's attraction is part of the conflict. So it's when to kind of integrate that and when to introduce that to make it clear to the readers. I try to always, actually state someone's orientation on the page, because I feel like that can be something to relate to as a reader. I like seeing, a character who is explicitly stated as queer, explicitly stated as bi. That is something that is comforting to me, but it's when to introduce that. And so I think some tropes are a little trickier when you have that backstory where the characters already know each other.
Is there a bisexual character or a trope that you haven't written yet that you would love to tackle?
I feel
we've heard Secret Baby from Rebekah.
I feel like I really want to do, and I haven't gotten to do yet, like a love triangle that resolves in like a bisexual polyamorous like triad situation. That's like very much on my like romance bucket list. It's one of my favorite types of romance to read, and I would love to try it to write one time.
The same for me. So if anyone has read How to Catch a Queen, you see that there are triads in the background, there are a religious part, and there was a moment I really wanted to make it a triad between the king, the queen, and her guard, and I was like, okay, I'm already like, as far as traditional publishing, I was like, Erica's gonna kill me. I already changed the second book in the series. If I'm like, by the way, and this first book is also gonna be a polyamorous romance, can you go tell sales that it's actually not? So I was like, I didn't change it, but I feel like there are certain scenes where if you read it, you can see it. I was really shipping these characters and like, what if they got together? So I think I even mentioned that like the guard is married, and that was for myself. She is in her own other triad marriage, and I was like, I put that there, so I was like, no, you cannot do that.
I read that and I'm like, oh my gosh, is Alyssa going to give us another novella with this side character? Because side characters getting their own novellas is like my absolute catnip.
They are not going to get, at this point in time, there are no novellas because Mama is burnt out. But
you don't have to rush. You can take all the time you want.
Yes. But so yeah, I have a similar wish list, I guess, for future contemporary romance.
And Katrina, how about you?
Not really. I feel like everyone else is, I want to write a polyamorous. I'm like, oh yeah, love that for me.
Yeah, no, you have like,
you're like, I'm already there. You're like, I'm in 2030 already. I'm there.
Yeah, I don't know. I did want to write, and I am writing it right now. I'm serializing it on Patreon actually, but I wanted to write, because I love a married couple who finds a younger girlfriend that is just for me. But I wanted to write a married couple where the woman realizes that she is queer later in life. Because I think that's an entirely different sort of dynamic, but it also sort of it also in some ways subverts that that power hierarchy of bringing a third into your relationship where they feel always unsettled because, they are sort of entering into an established relationship. So I would say that, and maybe if not that, I haven't written an all male polyamorous triad, which I think, again, especially because I think it's easy to erase the queerness of men in queer relationships, or to just not pretend as if you do not see it. I think, yeah, I don't know. There's just maybe a bit more space for that. But other than that, no, I don't really care. I'll write whatever.
One big final question. What was the first bi or pan character that made a big impression on you from a romance? And it can be yours or somebody else's.
I think this was the first. I think. I'm going to say this and then like an hour from now and be like, that was the wrong answer. The first, I'm going to go with, I can't remember the characters' names because it's been 958 years since I read it. But in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, she has the human cop who comes and like lives with them in the mansion, and then the other vampire, and they're like in love with each other, and they have this really like this relationship. Like she could not get there and just have them fuck each other, and she kept like surrounding them with women, but then like putting them in the situations where they were like naked together, and you were like, lady, just like you had like a human move into this house so he could just be around this dude. Like clearly they're in love with each other. Let's just go all the way. And then I remember reading Such a Pretty Face by Gabrielle Goldsby, which was really impactful for me because she's a Black woman who writes romance, and the heroine is a plus size Latina. So it was really interesting to have a Black woman writing a romance and there's a plus size character, and it was like maybe like the 4th romance novel I'd ever read. So it was really like, it was really like, whoa, like I was really happy that I was exposed to that earlier, because it like planted a really beautiful seed of like possibility in my mind.
Yeah, for me, we mentioned earlier that some MF readers were nervous about reading like either MM or FF romance, and I wasn't nervous about MM, but I was nervous about FF for a lot of years. And I finally picked one up in the efforts to diversify my reading and fell absolutely in love and kind of realized, oh, hey, guess who's bisexual? Oh, that's right, it's me. So maybe people are right to be wary. Like,
I actually had this conversation with my agent in the beginning of the summer. We were talking about this. And in the context of Casey and Alexandria's books doing so well, and like how wonderful that was. And I was telling her that, and along with what Alyssa was saying, that a lot of the feedback I've gotten over the course of my career is readers coming out to me, which is like beautiful. Like it's so amazing, but it's often cis women who are married to men will come out to me via email like quite frequently. And I think there is maybe this idea of like, if there's a man in the room, I can like hold on to my heterosexuality like for dear life. But if I'm put in a situation where I'm looking at 2 women and I like it, what does that mean for me? What does that, you know what I mean? Like as a human being, if I'm like, what does that mean for me if I finally read an FF and I'm down with it? And I think that has been a hesitation for a lot of people because they're not ready to go there yet.
Yeah.
That is so true. And I think it's also true, like what you said, because I think for many bisexual women, there's the whole thing of like, well, everyone also wants to make out with women. Like,
yeah, right? Like,
and then
it's just
I think, like you said, Rebekah, you take the man out of the equation in those books and people are like, wait, there's a specific thing for this. It's not just so yeah. And I do, you know, when we talk, I think this is the point that both of you brought up is really important, because a lot of times when we talk about why FF hasn't done well, or why it hasn't been accepted in the past, or why publishers assumed it wouldn't do well, it was, you know, there's misogyny, of course, but also I do think this is like a pretty large layer underneath that of people being like, let's not go there. Like, because if we, like, romance is supposed to be about like the hero coming to sweep you away, and a lot of people are like, yeah, well, that's cool, I enjoy that, but also what if it was the heroine who came and swept me away? And that kind of upends a lot of the understanding of what romance even is for, you know, purposes of discussion, purposes of labeling things, labeling it as a genre. If there is no, you know, alpha male coming to rip his shirt open and hang off a mizzen mast. Is a mizzen mast really a thing? I don't know. I just read that in the book.
Got it right.
But, you know, so I do think that's another layer of it, like you two have said, of just what does it even, and I think that's just in society as well, if women don't need men. I mean, bisexual and pansexual men obviously are like, okay, we'll consider you, but like just the idea that there's a possibility even that you don't need a man can you know, complicate some of the narratives about romantic relationships, even in fictional romance.
Are you saying that the media doesn't want to cover sapphic romance because they can't slap a Fabio cover on it?
Possibly. I mean, yeah, we can't bring up Fabio. Yeah, I mean, if you cannot bring up Fabio, who should only be brought up when discussing that time a bird punched him in the face with its beak,
Yep.
then they don't want to talk about it. If you can't bring up Fabio or 50 Shades, the F squared of romance, they don't want to talk about it. So yeah, I mean, and like, I don't even think it's a conscious thing. I mean, I feel like, you know, there's all of this, so much of the resistance to romance in general is like subconscious emotional stuff of like, I don't want to talk about this thing. Why are they writing about this thing that is like intimacy, which we are not supposed to discuss? And then you add like, you know, taking patriarchy, and not even patriarchy as in like, okay, men are terrible, but like, what happens when they're not even in the picture at all, or they are, but they're not the only option in the picture? It probably, yeah, makes people uncomfortable in that way where they're like, I don't know why, but I don't quite like this. I'm just not gonna go there.
Anyone else?
I for whatever reason immediately thought of Orlando, but like not the book. I had a huge problem with Tilda Swinton as a child, and like not like a good problem. Like I was obsessed with her, and I just remember loving that movie and watching it over and over again and thinking, you know, that sounds like the life. I don't know. It's amazing. She's just super attractive in that film. So for whatever reason, that was immediately what popped into my head. But actually, like, not to put her on the spot, but I would actually say it was Rebekah. Like, I read At Her Feet. I mean, I smoothed through her entire, or I went through her entire backlist very quickly after I read At Her Feet, but I would say it was At Her Feet. And then the one that really sort of got me was Sated. I mean, seeing a bisexual character be in a relationship with someone where the entire relationship is an exploration of sexuality, but not his bisexuality, right? So that was not really the sort of conflict that emerged as the one that mattered the most. So yeah, randomly Orlando and Sated. That seems like you should put those two together. Why not?
Not to once again put Rebekah in the hot seat, but this is like not the first bisexual like romance character that really spoke to me, but like the first like time reading like a relationship that I felt like was really speaking to a part of my sexuality and gender that I hadn't really gotten to see that much in fiction was like reading Zenny and Mason and Zenny, because like, I don't know, I feel like it is such a cool feeling to find like a, you know, an MF or whatever you want to call it, pairing that feels so queer, like from start to finish. Like it is, and it is such like a beautiful, like I've been like in queer relationships with queer men that were like predicated on like me not being a cis woman, you know, and just like to read like a relationship that is between two people of different genders that still is like from start to finish, top to bottom, no pun intended, queer, is just like so cool, and such like it makes me feel really just like happy about what like queerness is, because it can be so many different things. And so yeah, that was just like a book that was like really a good time for me.
I think for me, the first time that I can remember seeing a bisexual character explicitly stated on page was in a YA novel, A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libba Bray. I think that's it. And I don't remember a lot of the details around which character was bisexual, sapphic, but I remember there being a lot of tragedy surrounding the romance. And I was a teen or preteen when I read it. And I remember feeling kind of terrible about all of the tragedy surrounding this romance. So I do think it was formative in the sense that I wanted to see happy endings for bisexual characters. And now seeing that and seeing so many characters represented on the page being explicitly stated as bisexual, as queer, seeing them get their happily ever afters is kind of a great like bookend to that first formative experience for me, and now getting to write them is really great. And then I do have readers message me about, you know, kind of coming out to me, mostly after reading Hang the Moon, which is a queer MF of mine, which I find to be interesting that they kind of, they maybe notice that they're queer, they realize that they're queer, and they want to talk about it after reading a queer MF, and then they go back and they read Written in the Stars, which is an FF. So I'm happy that that kind of serves as the gateway, even though it's the second book in the series. So then they go back and they read the sapphic romance. So that's kind of special.
Oh, I just realized I didn't say which book. So as a kid, I don't know if they were bi. I don't remember, even though I read the book like 50 times. But Annie on My Mind was my formative book that I read many, many times as a preteen. But as an adult, Kate Roche's Beyond Shame, which I picked up. I was like, oh, look, this, you know, little sexy book, and I was like, oh, okay. And like, I'm friends with them now, which is kind of weird. I don't talk about this with them, but but that was probably my first like my first romance with queer characters. And if you're gonna start, Beyond Shame is like a great entry point. There's orgies, all kinds of good stuff, as well as apocalyptic orgies, as well as friendships, and, you know,
apocalyptic stripping also.
Apocalyptic stripping,
yeah,
apocalyptic fight clubs, like every kind of apocalyptic thing you could want. But for me, because at that point I had been reading a lot of historical romance, and like, you know, like Jennifer Cruzy, and like you know, more contemporary romance, or like starting to read more traditional historical romances. And then I was like, oh shit. I'm like, oh, we can do this, cool. So yeah, it was like I can't remember if it was the first, but it definitely left the biggest impression on me.
All right, well, it looks like we're getting toward the top of the hour, and that's where we're going to start doing audience Q&A. So I'm going to pull some questions to see. All right, let's start here. How do you ensure you're writing good queer rep? Do you use betas, sensitivity readers, things like that?
So I'm queer, so I kind of beta read my own shit. And I don't know, I have a lot of queer people around me, and I just try to pay attention to who they are as people, and I try to listen, and I also try to pay attention to how people younger than me, I say this like I'm 900 years old, but just how people younger than me are interacting with each other and with their sexuality online. I feel like, again, we're living in a really amazing time where people are allowed to be on the internet and talk about how queer they are. I mean, that's really cool. So that's helpful, and I just try to observe and be mindful. And I always try to write books too that are coming from a place of kindness. So it's a lot harder to like put harmful things on the page when you're coming from a place of kindness. To say that though, I have fucked up in the past. I have fucked up writing At Her Feet. I fucked up, like, I have messed up in the past, and I learned from it. And I've gotten really helpful emails from readers about certain kinds of rep that are outside of my experience. And I was so grateful that they reached out to me and said, hey, I read this, and it kind of like rubbed me the wrong way, and it gave me like beautiful insight. And I think now, you know, I come from a place of kindness, and I think it is hard to write the perfect book. I think if someone's going to pick up your book and be like, hey, I'm not really, I mean, I got really weird notes on So Sweet about how Michael didn't really like Kayla because he was like only into her butt. And I was like, I don't know where you're coming from with that, but okay. But yeah, you can't really write the perfect book. So I think you just do your best. But that is, I'm very queer and hang out with a lot of queer people. So I just kind of go from there.
Anyone else? Oh. Katrina, were you about to say?
Yeah, I was actually going to echo a lot of what Rebekah says. I'm very queer. But I do actually, I'm not polyamorous, and I do read a lot of polyamorous romance. And so I spent a lot of time, I would say that I stumbled into not writing harmful shit immediately, which was lucky. And then I had polyamorous readers who were like, thank you, this is representative of my experience, or this is similar to what I went through. And I just listened. I mean, I think, yeah, we're all gonna fuck up. That's life. But that sort of ability, which is not easy, right? To sort of step back and say, okay, this is her where I could have done more research. Like I really started looking into non-monogamy after Pink Slip, which is a bit late, but you do what you can. But then, having conversations, like I see Jen is here. She has a podcast called Monogamish. Like I listen to, people who are in non-monogamous relationships. I mean, I just do the research. But I actually just wanted to underscore what Rebekah said is I really am coming from a place of kindness. Like a reader asked me recently if I would ever write something like really dramatic and tropey in a polyamorous relationship. And I said straight up, no. I'm going to save the messy shit for, the hets or the people in like monogamous relationships, because that's my shit. But the least I can do, right, when writing about something that is not representative of my own life is to do so with care.
All right, let me see. Flipping through questions, cherry picking the ones that I want to hear the answers to. Here's a good one. It does seem like a lot of queer romance also has a lot of trauma wrapped up with it. How do you bring more joy into your narratives? Is that a focus for you?
I mean, I think for me, I think that for like any queer person, queerness is wrapped up in a lot of wonderful things and a lot of joy, and also like trauma and like, things that we've experienced that were not great. And I don't think that one cancels out the other in any way. And so I think it feels like honest to like queer readers to like have both of those things exist in a book, and I do try really hard to like have joy be at the forefront and to have joy be like the thing that's underpinning everything. And the wonderful thing about romance, that there's going to be a happy ending. So like, no matter what these characters are going through and what we're unpacking with them, we still know it's going to be okay in the end. So we can like have the faith to like, okay, let's like explore some of our internalized shit together, and trust that like this author has my back to like not take me to a place I don't want to go at the end. And so like, that's one of the things I think is really amazing about romance, and why it's such a great place to explore like the dark side and the traumatic parts of being queer in the world that we live in, is because, that there's kind of a safety net under you. And so I very much like want every reader to like feel like I'm like, I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel happy. I want them to feel better than they started when they finish reading. But I also don't want them to feel like I was dishonest with them about like, the realities of being queer. I want them to feel like it's something that's like relatable, but of course, at the end of the day, more than anything, I want them to feel joy, because I believe that that's the whole point of romance, is to feel joy, especially queer romance.
In my books, I definitely try to lead with queer joy. When it comes to characters, being messy or having parts of themselves looking for acceptance for, it's not their queerness, it's other parts of themselves that are the messy parts, but it's not their queerness. So when they're coming into it, looking for a love interest or looking for their friend group or their found family that accepts them as they are, you could see that as kind of a metaphor, I guess, as readers looking for acceptance, but it's not for their queerness. But I guess it probably colors it coming at it as a queer author. That definitely influences how I write acceptance, but it's not the queerness that the characters are seeking acceptance for.
All right. Next. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that like Casey said, romance is a great place to explore trauma. And different readers need different books. Some readers need books that do not have any trauma at all, and those books exist. And that's wonderful that we have that we're starting to have the spectrum of queer books that some deal with trauma, some are completely like, fuck it, we're not even, sorry, but we're not going to talk about that. And so I think there's a spectrum. And I do think that, as long as readers understand that like every single book can't hit every single thing that they need, and that they don't hold it against the author. And like I'm not talking about myself, but like, I just think like readers would maybe just give a little bit of, grace. Like some books are going to explore trauma in an in-depth way because that's what's needed for the characters in the book. To get to their happily ever after. And in some stories, it's not particularly important. And I think that starting to have such a variety, to have any kind of variety in these kinds of books, when before there were not even many bisexual books at all, or many queer romances that were being traditionally published, is like a huge thing. And that it's good.
I'll just say real quickly, I like to weave my trauma in with jokes. So
Yes.
like Mason's backstory in Zenny is very painful. He's coming from a family and friends who have completely rejected him to the point where he left the country where he was born, and had to kind of start a new life with his cousin, who was also rejected from his family for basically having autism. So I'll throw the trauma in there. It's in there. I mean, Harbor is like, you better buckle up. And Shaw in that book his family isn't supportive of him at all. But he has Vaughn and he has Vaughn's mom, and he has a found family that takes care of him in lieu of the other people who should have been supportive of him. So I think there is a way to have been a trauma, because like Casey said, that is realistic. Not everyone comes out and their families are super supportive or their friends are super supportive, and that's real life. It's not always just like this lovely walk in a rainbow park, but you can tell a good story that is about other things too. You know what I mean? It's not just about them being queer and that trauma. They're going on their own separate adventure, and then you weave a little comedy in there and it's fine.
So continuing this theme, we have a question. I feel like making space for your characters is a key element that keeps coming up in this conversation. And I wonder how that translates to the physical spaces you make up for them. Like if you include any queer clubs or queer spaces in your book. And Rebekah, you're making a face like you're thinking, but I know you've got queer spaces.
No, I'm just I feel so old, and I haven't been to a club in so long, and I'm like, club, what's that? Also, we're in a pandemic, so I feel like people should know, especially for writers, for those of you out there who have had to go to offices or on daily Zooms and stuff like that. Us writers are in some really weird caves by ourselves where we are not interacting with other human beings at all. So my sense of human interaction is really fucked up right now. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah.
I just try to give my characters friend groups where they're doing stuff they want to be doing with their queer friends, if that makes sense. They're playing board games with their queer friends. They're hanging out in an apple orchard with their other queer friends, or going on their queer friends' boat. I just want them to be in a situation where they have queer people around them, and then they can do the activities that they want to be doing. I think most explicitly and at her feet, they go to a submissive they go to a dom submissive a slumber party that is very specifically for that community. But I think that's the last time I wrote something that was cat shaking her head I'm forgetting something.
That's actually not true. There's a whole queer sex club in the Fit series. What are you?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, seriously.
Come on now.
I forget the order in which I write things. That's really the problem. That's the problem. But yeah, so there's a queer sex club in the Fit trilogy and stuff like that. But and I dug myself into a hole and brought that community actually accidentally into the Beards and Bondage series, and then accidentally brought it into Ray Fanzetti, and it'll be back. I still have to write Megan's book. So yeah, I have the clubs that they go to, but it's not like a club. It's more of a sexy club.
Casey, do you want to talk a little about, I know in One Last Stop you have that spectacular drag scene.
Yeah, they go to a drag show. And like in Red, White, and Royal Blue, there's a scene where they go to a karaoke bar that is like very much like hinted to be like a drag bar, just like on a karaoke night. I mean, I think that like ultimately though, what is cool about being a queer person is that like your queer space is like what you create in your life, like as a queer adult is, you know, you kind of can curate your life to be a queer space. And so that's kind of what I want to let my characters do is kind of, you know, they do queer things with queer friends and have queer interests and queer relationships. And I think that, you know, they make that space for themselves and they live in it every day. But yeah, no, I totally geek about, sorry, my sister just FaceTimed me. I totally geek about getting to do like gay bars. I love a drag show. I really wanted to put that in One Last Stop because Jane specifically is like from an era where like most of her social activity would have been in specifically queer spaces because that's where it was safe for her to be queer. And so I wanted to kind of like have that moment of August looking around like a drag show and like a specifically gay club and being like, Jane would love to be here. I wish Jane was here. Because it was like very specific to her history. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like so much fun to do in a book.
Anyone else? Sorry, I'm still scrolling through the. All right. This is just a fun question just because I want to hear what people say. If you could get any bisexual romance adapted to the screen, which would it be?
Of our own or just in general?
Both.
All of them?
All of them.
I mean, that's
yeah.
my
No, I'm
final
making it.
answer.
I'm making it hard on you.
I mean, why be picky, Olivia?
Yeah. Oh, that was your answer with all of them. Yes. I mean, I want a queer ladies historical where they end up together and things are nice. Like,
and they don't die.
And they don't die.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like for me, it's a historical that's not like a sad like gazing and like, you know, a lot of like people standing in the corners of the frames and then like everyone is like miserable and sad and separated at the end. I would love like a gay Bridgerton or something like like a bisexual you know, like period romp would be really, really wonderful to see on screen. So let's do one of Olivia's books then.
I want to see some like really, really, really gay paranormal. Like I want like
seriously.
I want like The Witcher meets True Blood, but like way less death and just way more like wild paranormal sex. That's what I want.
Yeah, I've been reading the Jordan L. Hawk books and like I just started Hexbreaker for the first time and like I want to see this on the screen. I want the shapeshifters. I want the Ali Theron historical paranormal set in the 1920s. Like all the big splashy fun times. Like we've got I want Alyssa's Harlem novella, whose title I can never remember to save my life.
Wait, I have two.
You get to a certain age, and then you've written so many books, and then people ask you about your books, and you're like, oh,
the Hamilton
you don't
one.
remember. You need a
The Hamilton one is That Could Be Enough, and
it's
the Harlem pre-Harlem Renaissance one is Let Us Dream.
That's the one. Yeah, with the suffragette heroine and yeah, I think it could be gorgeous on film. Think of the sequins, like think of the lighting you could do.
I would like to see it. I'm like, but like Rebekah said, I feel like there's so many, like, you know, we see all of these Hollywood remakes that are being done because of IP or whatever, when there are just so many wonderful bisexual, pansexual, queer romances that could be getting adapted that people want to see.
Yeah, nobody needs another Bodyguard. We just don't. Like, why are they even
if they're gonna make it gay, then
well, maybe okay.
That's the only acceptable reason. The only acceptable reason. But I'm sure they're not gonna do that.
No.
But yeah, I mean, there are just so many wonderful books. Everyone's books in here. And so many, I think all of them is just the way to go. There's the budget for it. We can do it. We can make it happen.
Come on, streaming services. We're in a war here. How do you feel about the impact of social media spaces like Book Talk and their impact on the community? And I actually don't know enough about Book Talk myself.
I am on TikTok, but I'm going to be honest, I don't look at Book Talk because I use TikTok as my relaxation space and Book Talk is work. So I sometimes look at stuff and I sometimes post stuff, but I posted a picture of some chicks this morning. I mean, a video of some chicks like that got hatched. So basically all of that is to say, I don't really have an opinion. I'm just talking a lot for no reason. I don't even know why. I'm gonna stop now. Somebody who has an opinion could talk.
I personally live for your farm content, Alyssa. Like I love it. So you should just keep posting what you're posting.
I've stayed on the fringes of TikTok because I think some of the beauty of TikTok is that people don't give a shit. So people are just on there like posting whatever. And what's actually really freeing about TikTok and Book Talk specifically is like, people will get on there and be like, you guys recommended this book to me and it sucked. And I'm like, I'm glad people like feel the space and just be like, I read a book and I didn't like it. And it's like, it's okay. You actually can read books and not like them. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I do like the freeing nature of how people are communicating with each other on Book Talk. It's kind of funny. I get tagged in some stuff. So I'll see, you know, right now, Zenny is doing hot numbers on Book Talk, and a couple months ago, Rafe was doing hot numbers on Book Talk. So I don't know. Promotion cycles within book communities always happen, so it just depends on how people are feeling. But I look at it just as another place where people are talking about books, just like Instagram or you know, Facebook or even Tumblr or whatever. It's just another place that people are talking about books, and I'm glad that they're talking about them.
I feel like to me, like I pay for a lot of attention to TikTok, mostly because I have a TikTok problem, and I will scroll for hours and hours. But I think like one of the things I think that's really cool about Book Talk is I've noticed like you really can never predict what is going to go viral on TikTok, and so that's why like you'll see authors have books from like 2017 all of a sudden hit list because it blew up on TikTok from like 3 different videos, and like that's it. Or like you'll go to Barnes and Noble now and you will see they have like a Book Talk table, and like several of the books on that table are self-pub that otherwise may never have ended up in like Barnes and Nobles across the country, you know, which is really, really, really cool. And so I think that's like what's amazing about TikTok is like, or Book Talk specifically, is that like it is, I feel like blowing up books that may have otherwise like not gotten as much exposure because of whatever reason, because they're backlist or for whatever reason. And so I think that's really cool. And I think like it's wild the amount of buying power TikTok has, because I can like see like on my like social media links, like I can see what's referring, like what platforms are referring most of the people who click my pre-order link. And like TikTok is outperforming every other social media platform for clicks by like 200%. It's bananas. So it's very cool. It's kind of scary, but very interesting to me, at least.
I will say that, you know, Rebekah brought up people tagging, and that is one thing that I like about it, because so one reason I do scroll by when I see book talks usually is because I'm like, if I'm not tagged in this and someone's talking about my book, they don't want me to see it. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep going. But when people tag you, I do like that you can like duet them and respond to them, or like send them a little video message. So there is like a kind of, you know, different kind of connection from Twitter and Instagram, where you're usually just like, thank you, or whatever. You can actually like make a little video and be like, oh, cool, or make a response to a question if you feel like it. So it's like a different medium, and that is more relaxed. Like you don't have to like go through all of this work and like make everything all beautiful like Instagram. You can like literally, like I could just pick up the phone and like be on with you guys and make a TikTok and put it down, and it's not a big deal. So I think that's an interesting aspect of it as well, as far as authors. If you are, I mean, I know some people do put like put a lot of effort, but like authors are often expected to do like all of these extra things now that can get really overwhelming. So it's like a kind of, in some ways, a more relaxed way of interacting with readers, you know, depending on how many people, I guess, are looking to interact with you.
Yeah, I'm not really active on TikTok. I watch TikToks, but I don't post. But I love that so many authors' backlists are having a second life and reaching new readers. And I love that it's, when books blow up, it feels very organic on TikTok. It doesn't seem like authors are generating the numbers there. It's really reader driven, and I love seeing that, especially with, you know, a new generation of readers finding books and getting excited about books that maybe readers were previously excited about 5 or 10 years ago. I like that.
It's also made me feel really good about like how angry I was that traditional publishing just kind of like left paranormal and erotica in the dust, and then Ice Planet Barbarians ended up being the thing, and I was like, see, I told you. Like it was very validating to me personally, just to
that
see.
Second hype cycle was incredible.
I was like, I told you all, and now I'm being validated by what's happening on TikTok, so thank you. I deserve a prize.
I know people who like never have read romance in their lives who read those books because of TikTok. Like, it's incredible.
All right. Speaking of, our last question that I've saved because I love this one. Where do you find great bisexual romances? Websites, recommendations, all your resources. What have we got?
My friends. Either they write them or they say, I read this book and you should read it, or I read this book and I liked it, and I say okay. But usually just like from lurking around and seeing what people are talking about. Like I don't have a specific place that I go, but it's usually social media, and it just happens kind of organically because of algorithms. Because of algorithms, it's like, here is this thing you would probably like, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're right, I would like that. So the algorithm doing me favors and my friends.
Coming back to book talk, I will say I do appreciate like the work that like book influencers do to like make lists of stuff, which I think sometimes, like for me, sometimes gets a little overwhelming because I'm like, is my book on this list or something? But it's really nice now that so many people are curating like categories of things that they've read and that they like to read. So now I feel like I have at least reliable like influencers on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, where I know I can be like, oh, that person reads a lot. Let me see if they have like a list of bisexual books they've read or a list of like paranormal they've read that they like. And obviously I might not like every single book, but it's a good way to like discover new things. And it's also even more helpful if it's like people you don't know, because you're like, oh, maybe our interests aren't necessarily aligned, but you might have read something that I wouldn't necessarily pick up, and I can try it and see if I like it.
I also recommend befriending your local indie bookseller, because those people will hand sell like there's no tomorrow. If you ask them like, can you find me, especially like a bookseller who's very well versed in romance. I have like my neighborhood indie, and I walk out with like 5 books every time I go of like some random niche thing I wanted to read. So pro tip, befriend your local indie bookseller.
And I know Ali mentioned at the beginning of this panel that Third Place Books in Lake Forest Park has a really robust romance section, and they're not exaggerating. Like there's 3 full like aisle length shelves full of romance. It's really excellent. They take recommendations if there's other things that you think should be there that aren't there. It can be like the trad pub versus self pub issue for indie bookstores is real. Like it can be tricky, but there's so much out there these days, and they do such a good job of bringing in so much more variety than most indie bookstores even. It makes me so happy. I can't even tell you. I'm also going to put in a plug for LGBTQ Reads on Twitter, and they have a website. You can search by pairing, you can search by time period, you can search by age range, fictional trope. You can look for high angst, you can look for absolute fluff. I know Dahlia Adler does an excellent job of keeping up with that. I know Rebekah is not running WC in Romance anymore, but it's still a great resource, and I know you have the LGBTQ tag there.
It's still being updated. I'm not doing like the social media side of that.
Oh, so good. But you're taking submissions.
The website will still be updated and books will still be added. I just can't. The social media side got to be a little too much. So, but those books will be there. There's like 3,000 books on the website. There's plenty of stuff there.
All right. I think we still have a few minutes. Are there any bisexual romances coming up that you guys are excited about?
I'm not sure. I think it's bisexual. I'm not sure, but Erica Ridley's upcoming historical romance. I think it's called It Takes Two. It's the second book in her historical.
Perks of Loving a Wallflower.
Yes, Perks of Loving a Wallflower.
Yeah.
I literally have no idea what the book is about. I mean, I know vaguely it's the family. There are heists in this series. I love Erica's writing, and I'm fairly certain it's bisexual. I'm not sure though. It's sapphic.
It's definitely sapphic. I think it is bisexual. Like I should have written that down. I read it a month ago. I'm pretty sure the heroine is bisexual, but definitely sapphic. One of the heroines is non-binary, so that's definitely it is utterly gorgeous. If you loved the Duke heist, this book is, I think, even better. It's got there's antique book nerdery as well as like sapphic stuff and dressing in drag as like your late father's fake heir, so you can court the woman you're crazy about in public. Like it's delicious. It's wonderful. I'm so excited for people to get to read this. I begged Erica for an arc is how I got that. So
I don't know if they're all bisexual romances or not, but there's a group of debuts coming out in 2022, and they're calling themselves the Holigays. So they have a hashtag Holigays 2022, and it's all holiday romances. And I'm really excited for that entire like slew of holiday romances. They're all kind of like Hallmark themed, but they're all queer. I don't know which ones specifically have bi rep, but I know that a handful do. So I'm excited about all of those because I want to see a bisexual Hallmark romance.
I had to just go like look up the title because I forgot the title. But Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly is coming out, I believe next year. And it's like Top Chef style, like cooking, like you know, competitors in a cooking reality TV show. And it's like a recently divorced cis woman and a non-binary person falling in love. And like very, very here for that. And can't wait to see how many, you know, suggestive food puns there are in it. So can't.
I'm really, really, really behind on like reading and intaking stuff that's coming out. I'm also someone who like, I'm not really great about pre-ordering because I love instant gratification. So I wait for books to come out and then I'm like, give it to me. Then I can read it immediately, or buy it and not read it for 7 years. It's one of the two. So I don't really have anything coming up that I think of that I'm looking forward to, but when those books come out, then I'll be excited to read them. And I'll plug one of my own. I'm finally going to write Megan's book. She's been in like 10 of my books, and she's very bisexual and will be having sex with all kinds of people. So that'll be out next year.
Katrina, anyone on your radar? Anything you've picked up recently that you're excited to get to read?
No, I haven't read anything in so long. Life is a lot. I'm teaching again. I don't know what's happening. No, and I mean, to be honest with you, I pretty much only read, as of right now, books that are racially diverse, and like queer rom just doesn't really always sort of give me that. So I don't always have a whole bunch of options. But you know, Rebekah, if there's an arc for Megan's book, you can let me know, even though I know they're white.
I know to devastate white. You. This will be be my first white couple. So
I know they're white, but I know that like Megan is non-discriminatory. So I know she's gonna do, let's be real.
Megan is going through some shit, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let a white man handle this.
I remember you tweeting.
I was like, he can handle all her problems. I was like, who can she unburden herself on? And it can be a white man. He can handle her crap. So
when you said that, I literally said, okay, I'll make an exception.
I was like, I found myself in a situation where I was like, I'm about to write 2 white people. This is really happening. But it was the only thing that made sense. It was the only thing that made sense.
Yeah. And Chinthia, I see someone said Chinthia's book. I don't know if either of those characters are bi, but it is a Black FF book on my radar for sure.
Man, Chinthia's writing is beautiful. Like it's just, man, it just sparkles. It makes me so happy. All right, so I believe we're going to hand it over. Audience, if you've taken the library survey, that's great. If you haven't, you're going to want to take the library survey. And I believe we're handing it back to, I forget if it's Nicole or Allie. Nicole.
It's Nicole. Hi. Oh my gosh, I think everyone's TBR is overflowing now. What an amazing day. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, Olivia, for moderating. To Third Place Books, to Seattle Public Library, to Misha, who really was part of the nucleus of this. One last plug for Emerald City Writers Conference next month. Cost is $150, October 15th through 17th, and you can register today at gsrwa.org. Thank you so much for coming. This was fantastic.
Is it over now?
Are we done? I know, I thought I was literally handing it over.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Oh, I thought I was closing out.
So let's just do one more huge thank you from us at Third Place Books. We love you, library. We love you, authors. This was such a great way to spend our afternoon. And I think that at this point, should we do the awkward waving thing? All right, wonderful. Have a good one, everyone.